Sup, guys? 2-5 yesterday. It's absolutely unbelievable that this run like this continues. The two wins were really easy. Florida, Nebraska, blowout wins, easy, no doubt. And then all five losses, I believe, were still the right side and could have and maybe should have won. And none of them did. I think at worst that day should have been 4-3. And then the way that those final games fell, and they all fell the wrong way when they looked like they could all potentially get there, like late in the game. It's just so ridiculous that this run continues. I don't know how these games keep turning like this late in the game. It's ridiculous. Like the games that were the furthest away from being a win, I guess, were the Syracuse one, but Syracuse still was they came back and they got to within the number late in the game, and then they still lost. And that was a game where they had I think they had at least 12 more field goal attempts, and they won the turnover battle 21-8, and they still didn't even cover as a home underdog. Like 21 turnovers is absolute madness on the part of Clemson. I don't know how you turn the ball over 21 times and still win by margin on the road. It's completely insane. Syracuse had way more possessions because of that. They, I guess, didn't take total advantage of all those turnovers, and they only shot 38% from the floor, and Clemson shot 60%. It's just so maddening. That's insane. What was the other college basketball? Oh yeah, BYU. Yeah, BYU. They were up by a pretty decent margin the whole time, up by 9 at halftime. So that's looking pretty good that they'll get to the 11. They were pretty much controlling the game. They're up 16 with 5 minutes left, and then inexplicably, even though BYU does have a pretty good defense and they can score a lot, Kansas State went on an 11-0 run at that point to, I believe they wound up even tying the game at one point near the end there. So then that completely killed the cover, even though it looked like it was pretty much over. You're up 16 with 5 minutes left. I mean, how do you allow an 11-0 run at that point? And I believe the turnover discrepancy was completely insane in that game too, on the side of BYU. I would have to look it up, but I think BYU had more possessions. They had way fewer turnovers in the game. I'm pretty sure. It's just insane. Clemson had 21 turnovers. I think Kansas State had 16 or 18 turnovers. I don't know how teams do that on the road and then still cover in the game. Although, of course, BYU was laying a ton of points. Syracuse was getting some points, but it's just totally insane. Syracuse was probably the loser that was at least one that I could take a loss because they were losing for much of the game. And same with Phoenix Suns over in the NBA. They were losing most of the game, so I can probably take that loss. But even that one, they were going to cover. I had a 1.5 on Phoenix, and they were covering right at the end. They'd come back, and they had a 2-point lead at the end. And what happened? Oh, yeah, Steph Curry hit a 3 from almost the logo, off-balance 3, basically at the buzzer to win the game instead. That shot misses, I win that bet. It's just so ridiculous. Not a very high percentage shot, miracle buzzer shot. So that blows that one for me. And then the other NBA game was the Portland Trailblazers, who just decided to keep blowing it for me over and over again. They were pretty close in that game. They were within the margin for, I think, more of the game than they weren't. It got to a point where I'm pretty sure that game was tied in the fourth quarter, and then they still wound up losing they wound up failing to cover by about 1 point or something like that, and not getting within the 8, which is, I think, the number that I had on that one. You have to be kidding me with this. And Portland out-rebounded the Pelicans, which is crazy. The Pelicans didn't play very well in that game. The game was low scoring. Pelicans, they could score a lot, and they only scored in the 90s in that game. They still didn't even cover. And they still covered. Portland still didn't even cover. Every one of these results was just unbelievable to me. There's no way I should have had a losing day yesterday. I should have gone at least 4-3, and maybe you could say that Syracuse, Phoenix, and the hockey game, Seattle, were the 3 more legitimate losses that I took yesterday. But it's just so insane. Every single one of them had a decent shot to hit, to get there. You don't expect every single one to actually do it, but you don't expect all of them to fall the wrong way either. It's to the point where you have to be on an absolute blowout to even cash the ticket. It's completely insane. It's so bad. I don't even know what to say at this point. But yeah, Portland, the game statistically played close enough that it should have been a cover for sure. It was a close statistical game, and Portland had more rebounds by, I think, a pretty significant edge in that one. And then, yeah, the hockey game. I mean, Seattle never led in the game, but I had them as the underdog, and they were never down by more than one goal in the game. The game was tied 1-1, and it was tied 2-2. I believe it was tied 2-2 into the third period. And then what happened? Seattle actually went on a stretch where they didn't have a shot on goal for 13 minutes of the game in the third period. What the hell is that? You have no shots on goal for 13 minutes in the game. It makes absolutely no sense at all. And that was like the most crucial moments in like the third period. So the shot discrepancy wound up being way insane in favor of the Flyers. But before that, it was like pretty close. And then, yeah, Seattle basically, it was like they stopped playing hockey completely. We move on to today. I actually like every one of the plays that I have today. Something's got to happen, man. I won't rehash the Super Bowl plays. You can go watch my Super Bowl video for that. But, of course, the big play, I am on the San Francisco 49ers at -1, and nothing has really changed about that. It looks like you can get 1.5 right now. You might still be able to get a 1 closer to game time, but there's not much difference between 1 and 1.5. I think you want to play the 1.5. That's also fine, I would say. You could go ahead and do that. The Chiefs are still the public team with 74% of the tickets, 76% of the cash. They do have the cash discrepancy, but it's the Super Bowl, man. Like, they're the public team. I would only want to be on the 49ers on that side. You can go watch my video because I do have a bunch of props in that game, in the Super Bowl as well. So you can go check that out. Moving to today, college basketball. Play number 1. We got to turn this around, man. This is probably the best play on the board, is going to be to play Tulsa +3. I think this is just an obvious play. This is a special of mine, the Toad special. UAB is in a gigantic letdown spot. UAB is up from 2.5 to 3 with 86% of the tickets on them and 73% of the cash over on the other side on Tulsa. I mean, nobody's going to want Tulsa here. They're the team with the significantly worse record, and UAB looking pretty good. And what is UAB coming off of? They've actually played 4 like tough games in a row against 4 of the top teams in the conference, basically, pretty much. They beat Memphis, although we know Memphis isn't quite as good as we thought they were. I never thought they were that good, but as they were ranked and as the general public thought they were. So they beat Memphis, and they went on the road, beat North Texas, which is not an easy place to play, and they actually UAB was able to push the pace in that game and throw North Texas off of their pace there, which, by the way, I will say BYU did not play that game last night to their tempo, so that kind of fucked me a little bit in that game. That played way slower than BYU tends to want to play, so that didn't work out for me, but they still looked like they were going to cover. But anyway, back to this. UAB, yeah, they beat Memphis. They went on the road, pushed the pace in the game against North Texas, and threw them out of their element on their own floor and played a higher scoring game than North Texas wants to play. UAB won that game. Then they had a second straight road game, and they played pretty well again against a pretty tough SMU team and only lost that game by 3. Then they came back home and they beat Florida Atlantic in overtime, a huge win. Beating FAU in overtime. Everybody knows who FAU is at this point, man. They're the best team in this conference, even though they're second right now in the standings because South Florida has been beating up on all of the worst teams in the conference, and FAU slipped up a couple of times. FAU is still the best team in this conference. Everybody knows who they are. They're ranked. They were in the Final Four last year. Huge win for UAB. Also a little bit of revenge because they lost at FAU earlier in the season by double digits. Turned it around and they won in overtime, a massive win. There was a huge court storm. I watched the end of that game. The crowd like totally erupted. Everybody was going insane. It was complete madness. And then after that, you have to go on the road and play Tulsa. Yeah, okay. Good luck with that, with trying to refocus on Tulsa there. And then they also have North Texas up next again. North Texas, they played them tough the first time, and it was a tough game that UAB won by 3. That's a bigger game too. North Texas just slightly behind UAB in the conference standings right now. I don't think they're going to pay attention to Tulsa, who's one of the worst teams in the conference. It looks way too easy to take UAB, laying very few points here. But Ken Palm actually has this game fairly close. He's got UAB only winning this game by 1. He's got UAB ranked about 50 spots in the rankings higher than Tulsa, but only winning by 1 here. And UAB as the 7th luckiest team in the country, meaning that their record is not indicative of what they actually are. Their record is not as good as, the record is too good for what they actually are. Their record makes them look way better than they actually are. And then Tulsa, on the other hand, is 234th in luck. So they're in the bottom half in terms of luckiness. They're one of the more unlucky teams in the country. So something's really got to give here in Tulsa. They push the pace, man, 29th in tempo, whereas UAB, even though I said they play faster than North Texas, which is true, they're 161st in tempo. So Tulsa's probably going to try to speed up this game, throw UAB out of their element. And even though Tulsa's 29th in tempo, so they play a way faster tempo, they're actually ranked better in defensive efficiency. They're not ranked better offensively, but they're ranked better defensively than UAB, which is crazy. So you're giving me the better defense at home with Tulsa, and Tulsa, the by far less lucky team here. All of this adds up to a nice play on Tulsa here. And just in general, this is a letdown spot on the side of UAB. So we're doing that. That's Tulsa +3. And I'm also going to be on another one where the market looks good for it. Iowa -6. It looks like they're headed north of that, though. They opened 5.5. KenPom, I think, only has this line at 5. So I would try to get this closer to the 6 range, but it's moving up, man. They've gone from 5.5 to 6. Looks like with juice now. I see 6.5s out there predominantly now, and only a couple of 6s. So I would try to get on this. Laying under the 7, I think, should be good here. 7, kind of the key number where teams stop intentionally fouling. It looks like the tickets are evenly split 50-50, but Iowa's got 75% of the tickets. I like this one, man. Minnesota's in a bad spot. Minnesota, they just beat Michigan State in a tough battle at home. That was a pretty tough win there for Minnesota there against a Michigan State team that's a lot better than people think they are, better than their record indicates. Although Michigan State's been kind of moving up, and they had a nice win yesterday over Illinois, which was one that I was not on, but I called, and I'm still kind of glad I stayed off of that one because the final score wasn't indicative of that game. That game was really close, and Michigan State put it away with some intentional foul shots at the end, and Illinois just inexplicably turned it over like multiple times in a row at the end there. But anyway, big win from Minnesota in their last game over Michigan State. They've won 3 games in a row, but one was at Penn State. Penn State, probably actually the worst team in the Big Ten power ratings-wise. Not impressive there. Came back home and they beaten Northwestern, which was a game I was on Minnesota, and they won. I thought they won by 11, but they won by 9. But that game actually went into overtime, so that game was a lot closer than the final score looks. Really, so that's a little bit misleading of a final score, even though I was on Minnesota in that one, and I liked the spot for Minnesota. Then Minnesota played well again at home against Michigan State and had that big win. So now they're off a big win over Michigan State, which is actually, I believe, that's their biggest Big Ten win of the season, and it was revenge because they had lost to Michigan State earlier in the season. So that's a tough win to be coming off of, man. I guess their other biggest Big Ten win was earlier in the season before official conference play started, where they beat Nebraska. But other than that, they don't really have a good record in the Big Ten here, really, even though they're 6-5 in the Big Ten. They've beaten up on the worst. Almost all the wins are against the worst teams in the conference. They beat Michigan by 2 on the road. They beat Maryland only by 3 at home. They beat Penn State by 9 on the road. And then Northwestern's a little bit of a better team. Sure. And then, they beat Nebraska, which is decent. And then beating Michigan State, that's the best team that they've beaten on the season. So they're coming off that. They have to go on the road, and they have Purdue up next in the middle of the week in 4 days. So that might be a little bit of a look-ahead spot, man, to Purdue there. And you're coming off a big win that you celebrate a bit, beating Michigan State, basically like a perennial powerhouse. That's a big win. I think this is a sandwich spot, even though they did lose to Iowa on their own floor earlier this year. Iowa was able to beat them by 9. That was a game that Iowa pushed the tempo, and Iowa was able to play to their tempo because Iowa likes to play faster than Minnesota does. So Iowa really threw them off their game. And if Iowa can control the tempo at Minnesota, you got to imagine they're going to be able to do it again at home here. So I like the spot way better for Iowa, even though Yeah, I mean, you could say it's revenge, but revenge is overrated when you get into these second meetings, and literally every game is revenge pretty much when the teams have played before. It's not like every team is going to get revenge here. So Minnesota did lose at home to Iowa, and so it is a road reversal revenge angle, which is a little bit of a stronger revenge angle, but even so, the market looks like it agrees with Iowa here. Minnesota's in a sandwich. They're off the big game over Michigan State. They got Purdue up next, having to go to Iowa. It's going to be a tough spot, man. Tough place to play. And Iowa's off a really ugly loss to Penn State. Iowa has not been playing well. They've lost 4 of their last 6, and the only wins they have in that stretch are to Michigan and against Michigan and Ohio State. So they've had some bad losses in there. Losing to Maryland, which isn't good. Losing to Indiana. Indiana's, and that was a game I think I lost on. Indiana's really not very good this year. So Iowa was playing pretty well, but now they've mired themselves in this awful stretch. This is a good spot for them, man. This is their only home game in these 3 games. They just lost embarrassingly at Penn State, who's a worse team than they are in the Big Ten, even though Penn State's actually ahead of them in the rankings right now. Power ratings wise, Iowa's the much better team. So I like all that. And yeah, they're going to want to turn it around after an ugly loss at Penn State. But people are also going to look at this and say, Iowa lost at Penn State. They have a worse record than Minnesota by quite a bit. Iowa is 5-7 in the conference, 13-10 overall. Minnesota's 6-5 in the conference and 15-7 overall. So how am I getting like 6 points with Minnesota here? Like, that's way too easy. And Minnesota just beat Michigan State, and 2 games before that they won by 9 at Penn State, whereas Iowa lost at Penn State by 10. So, like, what are we talking about here? Like, nobody's going to want to lay the points with Iowa here. It looks so easy to take Minnesota. People are really going to think this is value here. Give me Minnesota, But, of course, the records are misleading, like I said. And even though Iowa's been in a bad stretch here, that's just giving us value on Iowa. Iowa is actually indeed the better team. Ken Baum has them ranked 56th, and he has them as the 301st luckiest team. So he has them as like in the very bottom out of 360 or whatever teams. He has them really close to the bottom in the luck factor. So he has them as one of the least lucky teams. They're 18th in tempo. So like I said, they're a team that really likes to push the pace, and that's not what Minnesota does. Minnesota is 235th in tempo, so they play a lot. So he does have Minnesota pretty unlucky as well, 241st, but even so, Minnesota is just the worst overall team. He has Minnesota ranked 75th, Iowa ranked almost 20 ranking spots higher than that. And he has Iowa with a way better offense, 18th in offensive efficiency. Minnesota 105th, so Iowa the much, much better scoring team. He does have Minnesota as the better defensive team, but even so, he has Iowa just as the much better team in general. And Iowa plays the much faster paced game, which I said Iowa was able to even control the tempo in the road game here. So you got to imagine they're going to be able to do it at home, especially coming off a real ugly loss. So everything about this puts me on Iowa, except for the fact that it's a road revenge angle here. But everything else looks real good for Iowa here. So I like this one. I like Iowa. I'm going to do that for all the reasons I stated. And again, it just looks way too easy to take Minnesota based on the recent performance of these teams and based on their records and everything else. Nobody's going to want to lay points with Iowa here. It just looks really stupid. But that's going to do it for that. All these games are in the afternoon, by the way, because it's Super Bowl Sunday. So you got to leave the evening open for just the Super Bowl. We got 2 games in the NBA today. Both fairly big games. You got Celtics at Miami. I don't really have a gauge on the Celtics Miami game. Celtics are definitely a road favorite in that one. They are they're down from 6.5 to 6, but they have a cash discrepancy. 69% of the cash, 64% of the tickets. I don't even know if I would really say I want to have a lean on that one. Neither team played yesterday. I don't think so. I think they're both going to be focused on that game. They have reason to do it. Of course, the Celtics lost to the Heat ridiculously in the playoff series last year in the conference finals. But the Celtics have already beaten the Heat a couple times this year. And the last time they played them, they totally embarrassed Miami in Miami, beating them by 33 points. So I do think the Heat are probably going to have something to say about that. So the Heat do have a little bit of a revenge motive there. But the Celtics are also coming off a couple ugly games in a row, playing pretty poorly against the Hawks and the Wizards at home, only beating the Wizards by 4. So Celtics probably were looking ahead to this game a little bit and just not focusing at all on the Washington Wizards. So That might cause them to be focused a little bit because they really played terribly against the Wizards. But Miami's coming off a nice, easy game over the Spurs, too. So I think both teams are going to be focused in this game. So that it's a tough one to call. And then in the NBA, oh boy, I kind of want to play the Oklahoma City Thunder, but I think I'm just not going to be able to get there with it. I was watching this line. It was like looking like it, and now it's dropped. I do lean to the Thunder, but I'm just probably going to stay off of this one. The Thunder have dropped from 4.5 to 3, and I actually don't know why. And they have 71% of the tickets, but only 68% of the cash now. I don't understand this because the one drawback for the Thunder here is that they're in a back-to-back. But look at what they did yesterday, dude. They got totally wrecked at Dallas yesterday. So they are in a back-to-back, but they had 3 days off before yesterday's game. And yesterday they lost by 35 points at Dallas. So, yeah, they are returning home, but it's only coming from Dallas to Oklahoma City. It's a very short trip, and they got so embarrassed. Like, even though Dallas is a decent team, you lose by 35 to anybody, you're going to be focused, man. So you've got to imagine Oklahoma City is going to show up focused in this game, and they're 0-2 against Sacramento this year, too. I believe they've only played them on the road this year twice at Sacramento and lost both games. So I think Oklahoma City is going to be totally focused here. So I don't understand what I'm seeing in the market here, but the market is keep me off it a little bit. We'll see if my handicapping is good here. And then on the other side of things, even though Sacramento does have 1 day off, they just beat the returning champs Denver by almost 30 points, dude. And that was a game I was on Sacramento in that one. It was a terrible spot for Denver. It was a much better spot for Sacramento, who had lost to Detroit the game before that as 13.5-point favorites or whatever. They came home from a long road trip and lost in horrific fashion in a really bad spot against Detroit. And then they really turned it around in a much more positive spot and blew the doors off Denver and beat them by 29 points. So now they're coming off a 29-point absolute beatdown of the returning champs in Denver. Do you really, even though it is going to Oklahoma City, they do have Phoenix and then Denver up after this too. Oklahoma City does have one of the best records in the NBA as well, but like, there's got to be some point where they're not going to be as focused as the other team, and it's got to be this spot, right? Sacramento, yeah, I mean, when you have a team like Sacramento, and they're coming off beating a really good team and just absolutely destroying them by almost 30, and they're up against a team in Oklahoma City who lost their previous game by basically about the same amount or even worse by 30-something, you want to be on that team that just got absolutely crushed, dude, in Oklahoma City. Even though the line almost looks too easy to take Oklahoma City because they're the team with the better record and they're only laying 3 at home. So the line's kind of indicating that they're like only the very slightly better team. But I think it's a little bit more than that. I think maybe Oklahoma City's just getting a little bit, they're not getting as much, I think they're getting something taken away from them in the line just because they're on the back-to-back. But they played so horrifically yesterday that it's like, I mean, that game was over like so early. It was not like a full effort game. So I think they're going to turn around and they're going to be in a much, much better spot here. I'm tempted to actually play this still. I mean, we're just getting more value on the number here. It's dropped to 3. We could, maybe we'll do it. Maybe wait and see if it drops even further and see what the market does, but we'll do it. We'll take the Oklahoma City Thunder here. I like it. I mean, I think the spot is just ridiculous. It's one of those spots you have one team coming in off a giant high and then the other team coming off against like a real, real low in Oklahoma City. So I like that one. And then I think we're going to have a similar situation in the hockey game that I'm on. We have 2 hockey games today as well, a very small card. And I'm going to have a long ass video here talking about a small card, but I won't go into detail with the Super Bowl, like with all the props and stuff. Again, go watch my Super Bowl video for that stuff. I'm going to be on the Vancouver Canucks, even though this is going to involve laying a road favorite price here. They're up from minus 160 to minus 171, so I would have to get on this pretty quickly. I laid minus 170, I think, on this. And it looks like it's still shooting up into like the 174 range at a lot of places. Vancouver, they have 95% of the cash and 83% of the tickets. So you got to get on this one, man, if you want, because this is hockey. Like, not many people are going to be playing in these hockey games. So the line moves mostly on like a professional action in these hockey games like this, especially on Super Bowl. Well, on Super Bowl Sunday, maybe they'll get a little bit more public action just because people are in Vegas and they're looking for other things to bet on. But Vancouver's obviously the public team as well because they're the much better team. But this is a very, very good spot for Vancouver and a very bad spot for Washington. So I like this one a lot, actually, to play Vancouver here. I'm going to do it. You just need them to win the game, even though, yeah, you're laying a price here. I'm not going to go as far as laying this. You could lay the spread and like you could do that at like a plus 140 price if you want to lay the puck line and get them to win by 1.5 goals. It seems like a little bit dicier, but Washington, I mean, come on, man. They can't be in a worse spot here. And this is going to set up a nice like syllogism angle here. Washington's returning home from a road trip, but they did only play 2 games on the road. They are playing, both of these teams are actually on a back-to-back. They're both playing a third game in 4 days, all in different cities. And they're both playing a 4th game in 6 days, although Washington, their first game in that stretch was at home, and now this game is also at home, whereas for Vancouver, all 4 of the games are in different cities, but I don't think it matters that much. They're both in like the same rest spot, really. They're both on a back-to-back. They both are playing a third game in 4 days, all in different cities, and they're both playing a 4th game in 6 days. It's just that Washington's was back at home in the first game, but it still involved travel between those games. So Washington, coming off 2 difficult games in a row. They lost to Florida by 2 on the road, and then they went into Boston and they beat my Bruins 3-0. Really? I mean, come on, man. They're going to be in a letdown spot, dude. I don't even care if it's Vancouver that they're playing here. Vancouver's quite a good team here. They're running into another good team in Vancouver. I don't know what Washington's going to have left in the tank, man. Beating Boston is a much bigger game because it's at least a big conference win there. And Washington's really not a good team. And they went in and they just wrecked the Bruins. I mean, they outshot them ridiculously. The Bruins had a terrible, terrible game in that game. Absolutely insane that Washington was able to win that game 3-0. Now they have to turn around and play again right away and return back home to Washington, feeling like pretty high on themselves. So it is still a return home spot too, where you might have some of those like home distractions coming into play again, even though it was a shorter road trip. It still might be a little bit of a factor there as well. Whereas Vancouver, what are they coming off of? They haven't, I believe they have, or no, they've won 1 game since the All-Star break. They won their first game at Carolina. But then they lost the last 2. They lost yesterday. They did play into overtime and lose yesterday. So I don't know. Does that like hurt the spot a little bit because they played a little bit of extra time? I don't know. They only played 23 extra seconds in overtime there, so I think it doesn't really matter that much. 23 extra seconds, who cares? They wound up losing on a penalty shot in that game, so I think they're going to be pissed, dude. They actually outplayed Detroit in that game and they lost. I think they're going to be really angry about that. Detroit's an okay team, but that's still a pretty embarrassing loss. And Vancouver was winning the game 3-1 in the third period. They wound up giving up a power play goal, another goal in the third period, and then losing on a penalty shot, like almost right after overtime started. I don't think that's a deflating loss, really, when you're the better team like that and you had the lead late in the game. I think you're going to be pissed. So I think Vancouver is going to be a real angry team here. And they don't have a big game up next, whereas Washington does have another big opponent in the Avalanche up next, at least. So I don't know. You don't overlook Vancouver, but even so, Vancouver's going to want to turn this 2-game losing stretch around here. I think they're going to be pissed. They only have a game against Chicago up next before they do a revenge against Detroit. But I think they're going to want to take out their frustrations, and I think they're going to beat up Washington here. I think Vancouver should win this game. But then people are also going to look and see that Washington just went into Boston and won 3-0, whereas Vancouver just went into Boston 2 days before that and lost to Boston 4-0. So there's that like little syllogism aspect of this here, where you have a common opponent that both teams just played within the last few days, and the results were staggeringly different, where Vancouver just got absolutely wrecked by Boston and Washington went in and absolutely wrecked Boston. So even though Vancouver's still the public team here, because of course, people are going to want to play the team that has the better record. People know Vancouver's the better team, and the line's telling you they're the better team they're a heavy favorite, even though they're on the road. But even so, that might cause some recreational bettors to come in and think, well, wait a minute. Vancouver just lost to Boston and Washington just crushed Boston. Vancouver got crushed by them. So maybe there's value here taking Washington as like an underdog here. Like people do like playing underdogs where they kind of perceive value there. Like, oh, I get to lay 100 to win like 140 something on this game. Yeah, that sounds pretty good on Washington. Like they just beat the Bruins, man. And Vancouver couldn't do anything against the Bruins. So they might look appealing to some recreational bettors to take Washington here. I would disagree with it, though, obviously. I'm on Vancouver, minus 170. It looks like you can still get it somewhere in that vicinity, somewhere in the same range. I think minus 170. 171 might be the best you can do now, but that's going to do it for me, man. Go watch my Super Bowl video for all the rest of the plays. I am on San Francisco -1, and I'm on like a whole bunch of props. The props are actually looking good on the props that I threw out there for the player props. Like the Christian McCaffrey one is, you could still find 89.5s at a couple of places, but that line's gone up. I see mostly like 90.5s and 91s out there now. So I think I got a good number on the McCaffrey over prop. And that was the one prop where I said you probably need to get on that sooner, whereas the other ones you can wait. But the Mahomes passing prop has actually dropped a little bit too. Although as we get closer to game time, I expect you'll probably still be able to get like 261.5 or so on Mahomes. If you can't get the 262.5 like I did, that one, I think you'll still be fine. Like, and it's 1 yard. Hopefully it doesn't hit right on that 1 yard there for everybody, but we'll see what happens there. And the other, go watch my video. You'll see all the props that I'm on in there. But we got to turn this around, man. I feel good about these plays today, so we got to have a winning day here. And once again, those plays that are in the other sports here, besides the Super Bowl, where I'm on San Francisco -1. We have in hockey, which is actually the first game up, Vancouver -170. College basketball, Tulsa actually +3.5, not 3. I actually found a 3.5. That one, I really think that one's good. I like that one a lot. Iowa -6.5 in college basketball as well. And Oklahoma City Thunder, even though it looks like we're going against the market there. I think the situation's quite good in that one, man. I like it. Oklahoma City, you can get -3, maybe get an even better number than that. When all is said and done, have a good one, man. We got to start turning this around. I feel good about the situation. The situations are calling me, man. I actually feel good about all the situations here. So please let us actually hit on something today for once, man. Hit on women, hit on women at least. If we don't hit on all these plays, this is so bad. It's unbelievable. All right, man. I'm done ranting. Have a good one. Happy Super Bowl Sunday. Get some fried chicken. Peace.